improvement than the Tesla X Elite. It lets you customize the ads that it implants in every dream. And for premium subscribers, doesn't shock you in your sleep. But it doesn't stop there. It can analyze your speech, and if it hears disinformation, then it notifies police. It's a swift re-education, but it knocks you off your feet like your booster every 7th week. I face the future boldly, with 2 eager open eyes, and I picked a couple nuggets up that blew my fucking mind, like you can taxidermy someone while they're technically alive, and they'll shine when it's election time. See, the Democratic voter base will pay them zero, never mind if voting for the scarecrow is a vote along their party lines. They could stare into its marble eyes and claim there's something dignified. Unlike real politicians, this one doesn't need an oxygen or kit supply. But its function is the same as those who came before. The goals are never misaligned. It still spends all its working time performing pre-recorded fleecing sessions where it sugarcoats your slow and hungry genocide, while pouring billions into Nazi coffers, all the while selling you the story that we're moments till the MiGs arrive. So fuck it, ask Zelensky if he'll help replace our leaded pipes. Watch a fleet of Penske's show, stacks of bills in every size. Guess it only took a black sun and a couple Hiles. Honorary goose step and some Nazi boots a quarter mile, all while Biden sneers his sordid smile. I don't know what was in this morning's vial, but it makes him stare 1,000 yards through all the prompters and the cards like he can smell the nearest child. His eyes are wide and wild, wider than the grave in which another 1,000 families were tossed in as I typed until they rose up to the sky unceremoniously piled. Which sort of flies right in the face of all this network ticker tape where the American economy has superhuman vitals.
And sometimes some people come along with a hammer.
See, I like to think my trial's gonna play like a recital. I'll denounce the world around me and accuse the most entitled, who weaponize their titles, whose pull is something title, who'd starve us all to death to best delight their blinded idol. So they might destroy the record, and I will never get to vinyl. So my word is not immortal, but it's final.
Speaker.
It's a brilliant, powerful hammer. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade.
Blue check, better hold your breath. I'll slap.
Chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth.
Watch your Ray-Bans.
In a language that
Toe to toe.
everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously,
No.
we're fucked. We are
Right.
fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Smoke 'em if you got 'em.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
No, it's...
You can hear it. You didn't hear it. They heard it.
Barely,
They
but
did
what
it.
was that?
There's Wednesdays, my dudes.
Yeah,
You know how it goes.
so I heard the tail end of it.
Yeah, I just forgot to hit the button for you. I had to reset my PC like right before we did stuff, and then it was like I got just about everything together, and you popped in. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm glad I did that then. So
Welcome
hopefully
everybody
things
to
work better that way.
yeah.
You think?
But welcome to everyone for our 130th episode of INN News. I am your
Too
host.
many.
Too many. Well, you've done most of them.
Yeah, I've tried
Like,
to.
if not all of them at this point.
One
But
or two
I
on
am I'm your host, Collin
Friendly
Radix-Carter,
neighborhood
aka
Care Bear.
Bear. And
Yep.
I'm here with Tech Genius, co-host, all the things behind INN, Reef Breland. How you doing, Reef? Especially
I feel uncomfortable with the genius, but that's don't worry about it.
I mean, at least for the things that I don't know.
Sure.
Like, you help me out with 90% of it. And then
Yeah.
if you don't know it, you somehow
I can look it
do
up.
the things to figure it out. I guess.
I'm glad you have such faith in me. I do not have that in myself, but I try, and that's what counts. Yeah, I know enough to know I know nothing. A quote from someone, Anyway, hopefully your week's doing okay.
Sure. Sure.
I feel you, dude.
November is just traditionally a very weird month because, and given that we had election day last week, that kind of throws everything off in terms of having multiple days off, like midweek, and not being in work consistently. Like, I'm at work consistently for this week and next week, and then it's Thanksgiving. So and
Right.
I'll argue we're in the holiday season right now, but basically, like, the games begin like post Thanksgiving, if not that week. So kids are going to be riled up, like with presents and Santa and
Turkey,
Hanukkah
fill 'em with
and
turkey.
all the things, and
Yeah.
so it's going to be
Anyway,
it's going to be fun, but it's going to be like a little chaotic for me at least. So
Sure.
and then my kids are just like chaotic enough as is. So
Yeah.
we got some stories.
We do.
We want to try and not like lessen the load, but
I feel like me and you both.
It's been
just
very
by
dominant,
happenstance,
obviously, in terms of. Well, go ahead.
But I just felt like both of us were not feeling it, and normally, me and you both the ones when we're not feeling it, we tell ourselves to shut the fuck up and do it anyway, and we're like, well, if we're gonna do it,
if we're gonna do it, we're gonna make it count or try to. So.
Right.
And honestly, I don't want to make it count right now. I'm still
we can phone one in. It's all right.
No, but
we deserve it.
I think but I think it goes along with my first segment.
Right.
That it kind of talks about what we're seeing online in terms of, you're MAGA, you suck, or you're Democrat, you suck, and just a lot of that back and forth. And basically, people are throwing their arms up, being like, "I ain't doing shit now because you voted for such and such." And it's just kind of regardless, we're in this together, whether we like it or not, and we're fighting against the wrong people. And I've kind of been on this trajectory as of late, just being like, look, regardless of whoever was going to be president, there still needs to be a lot of on the ground, grassroots, local level work that needs to get done, that I feel like, especially given this current administration being in office, I felt wasn't getting as much focus. And I think now, given that the Cheetah Man is in office. I think it will have a lot more focus now. The question is whether people will be serious in terms of will they stand by the activism, not just when the fascist is in office, but are they able to kind of pull that off regardless of who is in office? So I brought this piece that kind of surmises a little bit. You said it was flowery, and I agree.
Yeah.
To a point.
I'm extra
we can talk about it, and hopefully our
sensitive to
audience.
that.
Yeah.
So
I agree with it too, but I think there was some good points in this article that I think really resonated with me in terms of where I'm at currently, and I'm sure where a lot of people are at, and just having personal conversations with people that I know online about this. So, I want to
The
shout
light
those people out who
of America's promise will always burn bright.
shut up. Anyway, I mean, I'd do anything now to not to hear that woman ever again. But
I
regardless,
know.
but yeah. So shout out to the people I had personal conversations with to talk about how to mobilize and organize on the ground. And so this article kind of talks about that a little bit, but I think just very surface level stuff. But hopefully as we get into, the upcoming year and, as this new administration is going to be sworn in, hopefully we'll have more conversations about that. Maybe have people on the show who actually do the work to kind of talk through a lot of this stuff. So let us know in the chat, or if there's anyone in particular that we should interview, let us know. And later on tonight, and I get why people might miss this. So actually, this is a twofer. So a lot of you probably know about the Amsterdam Pogrom, allegedly, that kind of erupted in Amsterdam, I think last week. Obviously, given our election, honestly, I'm very surprised this went way below the radar as I believe it did, but it makes sense given that everyone was so hyper focused on the election. So
who it's coming from, we're like, we don't buy that.
Right. So we do want to talk about that story. We actually did think about talking about this story. No, it wasn't last week, but I think we were kind of almost going to put it on the back burner, but this kind of related to the main cusp of the segment in terms of the UN is reporting that the overwhelming majority of the deaths that are happening in Gaza are kids. So obviously being a teacher, that's kind of close to my heart. So we do want to report on that story, but it kind of relates to the Amsterdam story because...
Is there a more important job than that of a teacher?
Maybe. But journalist Sana Saeed has been killing it lately, and she brought it up in terms of she combined the two stories, so we figure we'll do a 2-for-1 too and talk about both. So so we're gonna do that later on tonight. And then you brought one of them I'm kind of intrigued by, maybe.
Sure. Which one are you intrigued by?
You can guess which one because it's kind of in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I tend to find these. I don't know if the source is that great. We'll get into it, but I brought some boats this time, different boats. This is Maersk, shipping giant, friend of Lego in Sweden, makes them a ton of money. But they got blocked shipping stuff to Israel, and I wanted to focus on why that happened. And what I feel like moving forward will still be the way to combat a lot of the problems we have. But my other story is some bit of nightmare fuel about what Johns Hopkins University is doing with their AI programs. By the thumbnail, you can surmise that it's something to do with surgery, which already doesn't sound great. No. So, wait till you see where they're learning how to do it, which is even worse. But yeah, so that's what I brought. I don't know. Should be a fun time.
Sure.
But
It sounds like you probably have another Nightmare Fuel Rewind Part 2
oh
some
god,
point in the not too distant future.
at some point, I feel like if we don't focus on it, no one else will. But anyway, I'm ready. But as always, talking about these things is why we are demonetized on YouTube. So if you like this show and you want more shows like this, remember, INN News is brought to you by viewers such as yourselves, especially hopefully wealthy ones. Give us the monies, please. Please, the monies we need. But if you can't do that, we get it. Just do all the engagement stuff, like, subscribe, leave comments, whatever. All that kind of stuff that you normally would do. But, we appreciate some of the people that already do that kind of thing. They're here in the Hall of Fame. We appreciate yous. You can also go to Cash App, money sign, Indie News Network. We appreciate any and all donations. And a thank you. All right. Ready for our first one?
Yep. So first story, want to be a little lighthearted. I felt last week we were very heavy-handed, especially given the number of segments that we did produce that we're still premiering this week. But obviously a lot of you know, if you are in the online world, especially on Twitter, we're seeing a lot of blaming, as well as mainstream media, a lot of blaming as to, people or groups blaming each other in terms of Trump being president now, and just a lot of finger pointing and shaming in terms of how people voted. The reality is, we're kind of stuck. If you're like wanting to work within the duopoly, you weren't going to get exactly what you wanted either way. That's been generally our stance here at the network, especially between us. So I found this article, as I said earlier, and as Reef commented, as I kind of read it through with him and Indy last night, it is a little flowery, very not superficial, but very surface level. But I think, and this is my hope, that once, coming into the new year, that especially in independent media, that we really start having conversations in terms of what true organizing will look like and how to kind of build upon that, not just in the age of Trump, but following, because the reality is, regardless of who's president, we're still going to need that kind of work in order to get the things that we want, or to have a truly progressive country that people are looking for. So I think this might be the beginning of maybe segments I want to cover maybe in the future in terms of what that can look like. And, I talked to a few people online because they're starting to ask, like, what can I do? What should I be doing? How can I get involved? And I think, especially in independent media, I think those are the conversations that we should be having. And I don't want to necessarily hear about Trump every other segment from different folks. So
you can get that plenty of places elsewhere too if you want it.
Sure. But I mean, as for me, being an activist on the ground and actually having those conversations with my group yesterday night, our activism is going to look different moving forward. Obviously, like
much more active, probably for a lot of people's, unions and whatever.
Right. So, unions are going to be at risk. The idea that now, just with the conversations that I had with our executive director and then some of my other colleagues in Empower Ed, that's a teacher organization that I'm a part of, like our leadership in DC, like locally, will probably be a lot more conservative in terms of Trump. Like they're going to hold back because they don't want to have a target on their heads. And we don't have home rule here. So, so that can affect some of the policies that they may want to implement. So obviously working with kids, the Department of Ed, I know that was kind of the big thing. And even as a teacher, I don't even know what that means. So those of you who are kind of saying this is going to happen, we don't know that. I'm not sure even for me how that's going to work. But the idea is right now we should be basically prepping to go to war, regardless, and see and let the chips fall where they may. So all that to say, I brought in this article from Truthout, written by Kelly Hayes, where she writes, "Let's move beyond blame to fight for each other in the face of fascism. While principled critiques are often necessary, let's communicate like people who still need each other, because we do." And she continues, "This is a moment of tragedy and turmoil for our movements. A fascist game show host has seized the reins of government again and is now poised to enforce a Christian nationalist agenda. J.D. Vance, a product of Silicon Valley who subscribes to the techno-fascist views of Curtis Yarvin, will soon be an unreliable heartbeat away from the presidency. Last month, I warned of a revolution slouching towards Bethlehem, one that wasn't ours. Now that right-wing revolution is here. In the coming days, many will write about what to expect and how to resist. My biggest concern, however, is that many people of conscience aren't ready to put up a fight, at least not one aimed at our true enemies. Even before Trump's devastating victory, many activists and organizers were exhausted, felt that, isolated, also felt that, and disheartened, felt that. Our world was already marred with injustice, from the genocide in Palestine to the countless premature deaths manufactured by poverty, incarceration, war-making, and the violence of borders. For some, the wave of violence we're about to face merely blurs into the violence they have already witnessed or experienced. But for many of us, this moment of escalation, which could include the obstruction of any future democratic intervention, is chilling. I've already spoken to two friends, one of whom is a disabled trans person, who are both experiencing, I'll say, offing themselves in the wake of this election. This is a devastating time, and I'm deeply concerned about how people are processing what's happening. So far, I see two dominant reactions: outrage and despair. For friends in despair, I offer empathy and support, promising that I and others will fight for them. Some of us will come together to defend life-sustaining care, including gender-affirming care. We will sharpen our skills, break laws, build alliances, and take care of each other. We will find ways to defy and obstruct Trump's regime and to work to mitigate its harms. I know this work will happen. However, I worry about how many of us will take up this fight and how many who consider themselves good and decent will, instead, keep fighting each other. Many people are justifiably angry. They're angry about threats to healthcare, abortion access, and the potential of mass deportations. They are angry about the looming threats that trans people, migrants, Black people, Muslims, scientists, teachers, librarians, and many others are now facing. Scapegoated groups Trump has demonized will face both legal and extra-legal assaults. The president-elect has pledged to abolish the Department of Ed, and Project 2025's blueprint for change, including plans to privatize FEMA and slash environmental protections, is the stuff of nightmares. Anger over the pending loss of so many rights and lives is exploding in all directions. Many people are lashing out at anyone whose words, actions, or scroll down, please.
Yes, sir.
Inactions have disappointed them, casting blame and deeming any perspective but their own incomprehensible and irredeemable. It feels as though a lot of people have given up on each other, and that scares me. Zoom out.
Yep. This one.
When an election ends badly, there's always a blame game. That's nothing new. But in this moment, our movements,
There you go.
and many who claim to care about trans lives, abortion access, migrants, and the planet were already fractured. Leftists were profoundly alienated and siloed, warped by trauma and disillusionment. Some are bitterly disappointed by allies they feel have failed to adequately support Palestinian survival and liberation. Others are furious with leftists who didn't support Harris or rally movements behind her as they did for Biden in 2020. Everyone has opinions on who failed and how. I believe there's plenty of blame to go around. Our movements have made serious missteps. Organizers have made moral compromises, sometimes the wrong ones. Many people feel disregarded or wrongly vilified, and many of these grievances are grounded in reality. Our dependence on social media, which has intensified in harmful ways during the pandemic, has only worsened these divides. While these platforms hold some utility for our movements, we were never meant to live the bulk of our political lives in these realms. Social media has changed our ability to communicate across difference, rewarding acrimony, sacrimony, and excommunication. Modeling politics has too often replaced the work of doing politics. At some point, many people of conscience lost the ability to engage in principled disagreement, even if they ever bothered to learn. For many, persuasion isn't even an option anymore. Quite often, political discourse is about categorizing people, dividing us into the morally correct and the morally irredeemable, with no middle ground and no plan to change the math. It's as though many people believe they can simply disqualify the majority of humanity from political life, thereby saving the world. As an organizer, I find this concerning, to say the least. This is a climate in which post-election angst has taken hold. People are lashing out in all directions, solidifying rifts with people they will ultimately need if they plan to participate in the work of collective survival. I understand why. Anger is easier to inhabit than sadness. It's easier to be angry than to feel the loneliness of knowing so many people have co-signed your potential destruction. Lashing out at people who disappoint us can also deliver a small dose of satisfaction. Many people are desperate for that sensation right now. We live in a society that wrongfully conflates justice with satisfaction, so our efforts to punish the people we disagree with may feel like the pursuit of justice. As the hope of true justice fades into the distance, the pursuit of a cheap hit of satisfaction becomes all the more appealing. It's important to remember that our political aspirations have not been vanquished. We are not on the cusp of positive transformation, but that does not mean that all hope is lost or that we cannot breathe new worlds into being. During my 4 decades on this earth, I've repeatedly witnessed victories and political transitions that I did not believe were possible. I've also experienced losses that reshaped the political terrain, paving the way for future victories. We should never give up on transformation and material change. We are all worth fighting for, no matter how bleak the situation may be, and no matter the odds. Determined, organized people have toppled dictators, ended oppressive institutions, including chattel slavery, and freed each other from the clutches of carceral systems. In dark times, people have always found ways to make their own light. That work is now upon us. To undertake it, many of us must face feelings we'll rather avoid. People who cannot self-regulate emotionally or engage in principled disagreement will not create stable, sustainable movements. You can't organize people you hold in contempt. As I write these words, I can already hear some people justify their anger. I will not argue with your litany of grievances against your potential allies. I have a lot of justified anger too, but I try to be selective about expressing it because my political goals matter more to me than the temporary satisfaction of lashing out. If you believe the world is at stake, as I do, ask yourself, how much discomfort is the whole world worth? How important is your need to lash out? How can you balance your impulses with what you know must be done? I am not saying to suppress your anger or hold it inside. It's important to have outlets. This is a good time to vent the fury we need to express in group chats, with trusted friends, and in therapy. Be intentional about where you put these feelings. If you need to break something, then break something as safely as you can. Rage rituals are a legitimate form of self-expression. As Fiona Apple said, better that I break the window than him or her or me. To everyone hurting right now, please make space for your grief. Don't let anger shield you from sadness or bury your pain in escapism. Let your heart break over what's ahead. Accept that, no matter how hard we fight, there are harms we will not hold. If that awareness brings you tears to your eyes, then weep. Spend time with your grief, share it, and find comfort in your loved ones. Engage with the land and water and feel your connection to the biosphere we must defend. Immerse yourself in art, music, and all that remains beautiful in this world. Humanity is flawed, but our capacity for kindness, connection, and transformation is real too. Take solace in decency. It's still there. Our capacity to do good can be nurtured. It can grow and flourish, but that cultivation is collective work. We cannot change the world alone. We must learn how to be flawed and be human and messy together. We must learn how to forgive and how to do the work of collective survival with people we don't like or understand. We must recognize that while principled critiques are often necessary, we have to communicate like people who still need each other, because we do. Oh, there's one more. A lot of people out there are not going to be ready to do the work I'm describing until they make space for the grief and pain and for the grief and pain of others. If you are hurting right now, remember that the pain you are feeling is a natural consequence of your decency. Don't try to bury that. Nurture the tender parts of yourself. Your capacity to feel each other's pain is extrinsically linked to your potential to change the world. Your grief is bound up in your understanding that an injury to one is an injury to all, and that all of our fates are connected. Evading your grief will only compound your angst and isolation, will even increase your tolerance for injustice. We cannot afford to let that happen. So I have a little more other than this, but this is the end of the article at least. So, thoughts?
I have some. I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate them well enough to like
Sure.
not come across like an asshole. You know?
Sure.
Like, I get what they're trying to do, right? I think it's rooted in a bit of like fear mongering that we've been bought into, like a bit, you know, and it just feels like we've been doing these things. We've not seen you,
right?
You know, like that to me is part of this, where it's like,
right.
All this talk of unity and whatever after you lose.
Right.
And I don't know this person's specific, like, you know, who wrote this? Kelly Hayes from Truthout. Yeah. And Truthout has been a little wonky at times, at least for my taste. But it's more about like, where was this attitude 8 years ago, 6 years ago? Or like, we've dealt with this before.
Yeah.
You know. So for me, it's we're the ones talking to people like the anti-war guys who we don't agree with politically on everything, right? We talk to libertarians and anarchists, and there's a lot we agree on. We've been doing that already.
I mean, I would even argue, even within our network, we're like, I think we're kind of aligned in a lot of ways, but in other ways we're not. And those conversations are private. But
and it just feels like, look, all that rage and anger you have, don't use that. Like, get over that so we can go back to decorum.
But you know what? What she said there. What I'm glad she said, she acknowledged the fact that there have been people who have been doing this work for a long time, and they have probably every right to be frustrated,
right?
Because this is the shit that I've been saying for the last few months. It's the idea, like, what I'm seeing online is that your candidate didn't win, so you're going to take your ball and go home because you're pissed off, instead of really kind of getting and the idea that people are like, oh, we'll push her left once she's in. It's kind of like,
Yeah,
no, you won't.
Fucking
Because
won't.
you weren't doing that under Biden. You were out partying or whatever, while the real ones who are actually
Yeah.
doing the work were basically being like, where the, as you said,
Well,
where the
and
fuck are you? Like, I've said this
honestly,
many times.
I've seen
Go
that
ahead.
recently of like, oh, people are actually able to call out the neocons and whatever going into this new, it's like I'm already seeing people like start to pay attention again. And it's like, why do you guys only do this
For the
against
people that you hate?
for the blue team? Like,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
and I wish Kelly kind of spoke into that, because it does seem more, there's definitely seems to be, I'm not sure if she intended to have that bias, but there
Yeah.
definitely seems to be a bias there.
and I get
slightly,
it.
in terms of,
This is the feeling in the Truthout writers room too. Like, you know, she mentioned that this is her colleagues and the people she works with, and you know, I get all of that. At the same time, you know, this feels like, I don't know, it just feels like something we're already doing.
yeah.
You know,
Right.
like,
I think for me, and I've said this many times, but basically since 2020, like I felt abandoned in
Yeah.
terms of, I was like, and I only started like my activism like 2019. So basically just before like George Floyd, like just before, you know, the pandemic hit, you know, I was just starting to get my feet wet, just being on the ground
Yeah.
and actually trying to organize. So basically, I kind of came into it at a really pivotal time, with George Floyd in particular, plus COVID.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then I remember like 2020, the moment Biden won, everyone's just like, people were celebrating in the streets. And I remember everyone's so excited, like cars honking or whatever. And I was just kind of like, what are you celebrating? What? It's not like, I get that people are celebrating Trump, but it's like there's more
Yeah.
work that needs to be done. It's not like we
Well,
got universal health care. It's not like people got, you know, are living homeless people off the street. It's not like children are not like suffering in terms of the education system that we're providing for them. And people weren't necessarily, as I said, it's funny that people care about the Department of Ed now that Trump is in office, because it might do dismantle. And my argument is like, the Department of Education is actually shit. Me saying this as a teacher is actually shit. I don't know exactly what they do in there. And I, you know, and I kind of work in kind of in parallel to that, you know, but it's kind of like, what work do you guys do to really progress, to make things equitable for our kids? Because I see it every day. Like, I have kids, even in my school, who are reading on a kindergarten level, and they're in 2nd and 4th grade. Like, what the fuck is this? This is the kind of bullshit that I've been seeing. And people are just like, oh, well, Trump is going to do. I'm like, yeah, but this was happening underneath.
That's been happening. It happens regardless of what. Yes, I know. And it's
So
also, and then it's the blame is placed on the presidents themselves, whether they do good or they do bad. It wasn't their decisions. It never was their decisions to begin with. So anyway, I just felt like this was like a lot of kumbaya with not a lot of like, you know, kumbaya is just a song if it's not being used for something. You know what I mean?
Here's the thing.
Like,
here's the thing, though. I did want to bring this to you because I knew you kind of. I wanted
would feel away.
Yes,
Like,
I wanted that, because I felt, well, I've been feeling away, and I get where she was coming from with this, but
it's
at the same time,
I feel like it's something I've heard before 1,000 times of like unity and all that jazz, and it's like, yeah, unify behind us. How about the ones that were being right? How about you come talk to us first? And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I don't mean just myself and Collin. There's plenty that I would point you to as far as the smarter people, you know?
Right.
But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know who it's meant for, you know, and what they're trying to get them to.
I think it's really meant for. Honestly, I think it's really meant for like the regular schmegular folks, probably more liberal,
Yeah.
who are kind of like
We're terrified right now
and feel like we got to do something
because of mainstream nonsense.
Look, here's my thing: if you're serious, well, in my mind, I'm like, where the fuck have you been?
Yeah.
But if you're serious, I'm like, come on. But my intention, and I've said this maybe within the last 2 weeks. Look, don't expect me to go. Like, I'm more cautious of people now, especially given the activism, because I don't want the people who just go by a trend. I would argue even with Palestine somewhat, we've talked about that too.
Yep.
You know, like it just seemed to be the trendy thing to be
A lot of bare minimum positions getting fucking.
And look, the reality is, will there be more protests? Maybe, I would guess more likely, but that should have been happening still now, because Biden can still do shit now, even in a lame duck, session. So, I want to have people who are serious, who are willing to do the work, but are willing to do it for the long haul, not when they feel like, when their lives are at stake. Because the reality is, for me, my life is at stake just existing as a Black man in this country. So I don't need you to come along just because you feel scared. I want you to come along because you feel that passion and that vindication to actually make change, and to go about it in a way that I'm going to stay in it at the risk of my life. That's key, to ensure that others get the liberation that they receive, and not just yours.
And you ain't Black.
Because I see a lot of selfishness and a lot of the name blaming. It's like people are mad because their comfort is possibly
that whole thing too is that was the other side of this, where it was like, well, let's not place blame. No, there's some people that like need to be held accountable.
Right.
Like, and you need to be able to. This is the other thing. It's Democrats don't want to look at why things went the way they did. A lot of them already know and still don't want to look at it. Like they don't want to take the onus.
Right. The fact that our leadership is still in place, the Democratic leadership is still in place, is ridiculous.
Well,
every one of them should be fired.
They've been sheltered so far from what's actually happened that they're like, they don't understand. Like they're bewildered. So they don't get what happened.
So, like I said, as much as look, I only pulled the article because I think, as I said, it's I don't want to say decent, but it's kind of a meh start. But I hope we can give a little more nuance to that moving forward, with actual people that are able to speak more into that nuance. Like, ideally, those are the people that I want to talk to. And I'm only saying that because I've had people who've come to me to talk to me. Actually, if you go to the slide, I think I'm going to skip a slide. Which one? Come on. This one. Like, to shout out to Zach, who I've known online for a very long time.
Zachary.
Who said on Twitter, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
What should we be doing? And I'm like, dude, DM me. Let's talk. And he did. And we started talking. And I'm not going to go into what we talked about. But, but these are the conversations that I think we should be having. And I hope we have them in independent media. So hence this tweet. I appreciate people like Zach, who are asking how to implement parallel lines of power within our communities so we don't have to depend on the duopoly. These are the conversations I'm interested in having, and I hope more people follow suit. So to go back a slide, this is kind of what I'm seeing. Now, this is from Bing Chen. I think he's an influencer that I follow on Instagram. Like, again, he's one that he seems more liberal to me. So I'm not sure if he's necessarily serious, but and there was more to. I think he had it as a story that I didn't get a screenshot of, but he had this on his page. So he said, "I'm so grateful to everyone who be fighting the system, and I'm even more fired up to build outside of it, so we're no longer relying on them, government. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Frederick Douglass. So I appreciate the tweet, but I mean the Instagram
Sentiment.
post.
Yeah.
But again, my question is, are you doing this because you're fearing of Trump, or are you doing this because you actually hate our government and you actually want to do something to make our lives better in spite of Trump? So I think those are the questions that people should be asking versus like this person's fault or that person's fault or the other. That I agree with that sentiment. But what does true solidarity look like moving forward? These are the conversations that we should be having, because a lot of people within the last week and change have showed their ass, basically being like, bitches, you're on your own. And I'm like, instead of having that stance, you should be having the stance of, look, we may not like what's going to happen, but we're in for war. And we need as many bodies as available to fight for the people that we care about, even if you voted the wrong way. And I'll say this right now, if you voted for Trump, I may disagree, or if you voted for Kamala, I may also disagree, but I understand why. I'm not going to shame you in how you voted, because our system is designed for you to trap you into awful options that you feel compelled to vote for either one of them, when we really should be talking how to break away from it. So if you're not going to have those conversations, I don't want to talk to you, because it should be very obvious that the duopoly doesn't give a shit. It's just like ping pong with you. You're not getting anything necessarily out of it. You might get some crumbs as kind of like a consolation prize, but that's not really the thing that you really need. So, like I said, if you're willing to have those conversations, you know where to follow me online. You can have those conversations with me privately or whatever. But we'll see what happens. But regardless, I'm going to be still here. But I'm going to keep doing it regardless of whoever it is president. So I just hope that others will take that same stance and fight for the long haul and not just for the next 4 years. But this is why conversations like these are like YouTube hates us, but we really don't care. So if you want to have conversations like these moving forward, or if you're interested in maybe having organizers on who actually do the work that we can talk to figure out what does the solidarity / organizing / parallel lines of power look like, how that could be implemented in our community so we're not reliant on our governmental leaders on the federal level. Let us know in the chat. To support our work, please scan the QR code if you have your smartphone, or you can go to the link that you see at the bottom of your screen, or if you're in chat right now, you could type in !donate and the link will pop up in the chat. If you want to donate, any amount helps, as we always say. Take care of yourselves, take care of your communities, take care of your families before you give to us. But if you have any extra to give, we really appreciate it. Even if it's as little as $1, we will love you for it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share our content to fight the suppression. And make sure to leave a comment. We do read them. A lot of our story ideas do come from you. So please let us know what stories we should cover or people that we should talk to, especially in this upcoming year. And help us get to free K, just so we're able to have more people see our content and be able to share, and that we're able to grow, because YouTube is not going to help us. So the only help that we do get is from people like you. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, we did it. We can do some chats.
Yeah.
People are probably still rolling in. So Got the Accord Lord here, Earl of Laurel. Oz the Boomer was here at the beginning. Oz. Go check out Oz's stuff. I left in the chat for people, which I can again, the link to the Rumble. So you can always follow us on other platforms. We appreciate it. That one. Cool. But anyway, well, we probably can get to our next one.
Yeah.
So, do you read any about this story, Care Bear?
No.
So I grabbed it because I felt like people are wondering what they could be doing, you know?
Yeah.
And while I wouldn't condone a lot of actions on this show, seeing as how Big Brother is listening, but we will talk about a few ways. So this is over in SharePost. This is from Anne of her car from People's Dispatch. So Spain to block Maersk ships bound to Israel after pressure from activists. Look at that, Collin. Pressure seems to be effective. Who would have thunk?
Yeah.
So the Spanish government has announced it will block 2 ships, Denver and Seletar, operated by shipping giant Maersk, and carrying military cargo bound for Israel from docking at the port of Algeciras. This decision comes just days after the Mask of Maersk campaign released a report exposing the company's regular use of the Spanish port for transferring cargo that enables the ongoing genocide against Palestine, despite Spain's stated arms embargo. Researchers from the Palestinian... Yes, continue.
I mean, I'm not sure. I didn't read the article. Does it say what cargo is in these ships?
I mean, it could be anything. Normally, Maersk deals with shipping containers, right? So anything that can be within a shipping container.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, like, they can carry... God, I used to know the exact number for a lot of these Maersk ships, but it's like, I mean, hundreds of shipping containers can be on board.
Right.
So, you know, quite a bit. But, I mean, you saw the photo, right?
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
my dad
These
was
are
a
all...
shipping agent for a time, so, you know,
Yeah.
so I'm used to containers, but that doesn't help if necessarily, if that could be anything in
Anything.
So that, I think that's the point. It's
Yep.
like, they can
Weapons
say,
and... Right.
they could say, we're not going to give, quote unquote, we're not going to give arms. That doesn't mean that they won't. So, I'm getting balloons.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But, just doing the air quotes. But, you know, but that's my point. Well, military cargo, so weapons. So,
for sure. I think it does go into a bit about that. But researchers from the Palestinian Youth Movement and Progressive International who contributed to the report told People's Dispatch that it is unclear whether Pedro Sanchez's administration was genuinely unaware the shipments have deliberately chose to look the other way. What is
Probably
clear,
the
however, right, is that since Sanchez has announced the embargo in May, Maersk has succeeded in delivering thousands of tons of military cargo to Israel. It appears that Maersk typically sends 1 ship per week from New Jersey to Spain, carrying around 1,000 tons of military cargo destined for the Israeli military, the report says. These shipments end up being used in Gaza, facilitating the killing, torture, and kidnapping of Palestinians. In recent months, Maersk has transported aircraft parts, armored vehicles, and projectile bodies, much of which has been essentially subsidized by U.S. tax dollars. The shipment also included nearly 300 tons of goods labeled as diplomatic cargo. What? What do you think that is? Diplomatic cargo.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the equivalent of us sending aid.
Okay.
In addition to weapons.
Right.
So, you know, so it's like, we will feed you and then kill you.
Yeah.
So, and that's the idea that with some folks who voted for Kamala, they didn't quite necessarily think about, because they fixated on the language of Trump is going to make it into a parking lot. And I'm like, first of all, it's already is a parking lot, because the infrastructure has been decimated already. Trump doesn't have to do shit really to that. But then it's the idea of like, kill you or feed you and then kill you. Like, which would you prefer?
I mean,
honestly, if it were me, just kill me.
Yeah, kill and then feed. That's the thing.
Right. Right. Like, honestly, I don't want to make it sound so cynical, but I'd rather have what Trump is having.
Who are these people?
Hey, look at
thank
that.
you.
Appreciate that. Little $20.
Yeah, I'd rather you just kill me. Don't like no, but but that's what I appreciate about Trump. Like, he's so transparent. Like, he doesn't necessarily hide behind his crap. He says it with it generally with his whole chest and ass, versus the Democrats who try to do good, or at least allegedly try to do, but they do shit too. So to me, that's worse.
Yes.
So yeah, diplomatic cargo is just a way of saying, yeah, it's just to subvert the idea. No, we're sending weapons.
Yeah.
So
diplomatic.
Like why? Anyway, a classification that, according to PYM and PI researchers, is undoubtedly being used to obscure the true nature of the containers. Right. This is one of the several strategies used to evade oversight over shipments bound for Israel. Others include submitting blank designations and relying on freight forwarders to mask the trace of what is being transported.
And I'm sure that's illegal. But
even shadier.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
but I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some loopholes being exploited. But these entities, including Interglobal Forwarding Services, IFS, used by Israel, can get very creative in how they describe cargo. The Maersk of Maersk report documents such practices and makes it clear that shipments bound for Israel should undergo regular oversight and inspection in order to stop ammunition and other military cargo being transported there. Between 2011 and 2014, for example, IFS managed to transport over 16,000 tons of diplomatic cargo on Maersk ships. According to the report, this designation appears to establish a stable supply chain of goods whose true nature remains concealed from custom authorities and the public. PYM and PI warn. Any questions so far, Care Bear?
Well, the dates. Go back to the dates.
Yes, sir.
So between 2011 and 2014, I mean, we know Hamas has been a thing since then, but like everyone makes it seem like October 7th was when Hamas was a big deal. So
yes,
why are they sending arms during this time? So, and that was under Obama.
Yeah, yes.
So granted this is Spain, but still, it's like,
yeah, during that time frame.
Right. This is during the Obama era. So of course you're not going to necessarily hear anything about this under a Democrat.
No.
So that's the point. It's the idea of like you somewhat accept it in the same way, like you're blaming people for voting for Trump, but due to reasons, but you need to point a finger to yourself for voting for people who are complicit in genocide. You're just as bad, if argue, if not worse.
We are the United States government. We don't do that sort of thing.
So, you're pointing fingers at people who voted for Trump, but you should be pointing, so it's just the hypocrisy, I think, is just ridiculous. But
yes, as always. It's the God. It reminds me of a now I'm gonna blank on his name. Famous comedian, but it was he was talking to Jerry Seinfeld, where Jerry was like, "No, it was the hypocrisy of the matter." He was like, "Really? I thought it was the sexual assault. I thought that was it was over Cosby. That's what it was."
Okay.
You know? Anyway, someone will let me know who that was.
Is let us know in the chat.
I'll think of it in like 5 minutes when I can remember it. He's dead now. Rest in peace. But so Maersk is fully aware of these operations, as well as the nature of the cargo its ships transport, and could halt them immediately if it chose to. The report's authors told People's Dispatch, however, it continues to enable this flow of deadly cargo, fueling the genocide as a result. Responsibility to block these shipments now lies with the governments of the countries whose ports are used in the transfers. Researchers noted that Egypt, Morocco, Italy, and Turkey must all be held in the same scrutiny as Spanish authorities. For instance, after being denied access to Spanish ports, the Maersk Denver sought permission to dock in Tangier, sparking a BDS call urging local activists to mobilize and prevent this. Reports that Mediterranean ports might allow these ships to dock are deeply troubling and moreover stand in violation of several UN resolutions and recommendations. So the researchers emphasize that pressure must continue on the Sanchez administration until it commits to inspect every Maersk vessel originating from the U.S. and carrying cargo to Israel. Given the practices highlighted in the reports, these vessels must be blocked from docking, nothing more and nothing less, stated PYM and PL activists. Without grassroots pressure, governments are likely to ignore public opposition and continue allowing military cargo to flow to Israel through their logistical hubs. What's needed now, according to the researchers, is a stronger mobilization of trade unions and workers' actions against these shipments. For example, in October, dock workers at Athens Piraeus port successfully blocked a shipment of ammunition destined for Israel. Though such direct action triggers government repression, PYM and PI researchers argue that it remains one of the few effective ways to disrupt and halt Israel's arms supply chain. That sentence right there. No?
Well, to a point, I agree.
Yes.
See, I'm mixed on this now because in theory, yes. But I think the key is it shouldn't be the only thing that happens. This should be in line with other actions that you are taking. So you shouldn't be just going out in the streets and yelling. You should be doing other things to try and affect that change. You know, so I can't necessarily say in this case what they could also do. I think they're kind of, I would say there was some success in this case, but it shouldn't be like a one.
That's who it was.
Right.
Sorry,
but it shouldn't
my brain
be like,
figured out what I was thinking of earlier.
But it shouldn't be like a one-time thing. And I think that's the problem. It's that when it becomes a trend, like, and I think especially now in social media and we've seen this since 2020, but really even before that, like with the BLM movement, that once government sniffs out what you're doing, they will do whatever they need to co-opt it to kind of take away the sting away from it. Like we've seen that with BLM, we've seen that with George Floyd, and I'll argue we're kind of seeing that with Palestine right now.
For sure.
And
we'll see that with the new resistance too, as far as whenever that shows up.
Normalized now that there's a genocide going on, which I'm kind of like, what the fuck have we become that we're kind of normalizing it? So
I think the important bit to take from it is the things that they are saying is effective is attacking the money, right? Like attacking the way for the status quo to continue requires the resources. If you can put wrenches there, in those cogs, that's where you were. So waiting for those actions to become available to you, then, you know, like capitalizing on it. It doesn't necessarily just have to be trade unions. It doesn't necessarily just have to be, you know, we talked about plenty of the stuff as far as, you know, just educating the peers around you. But,
Right.
you know,
It kind of goes along. I have to find it because I saw it in the chat. Someone said, ooh, I think so. Yeah, here we go. So Nadio Nostrum said mutual aid does feel like a band-aid. I get that sentiment.
Yeah.
But that should be, it's not going to cover everything completely. Yes, you're right. However, it will provide, depending on what your action is, it will provide some immediate need to people
if
who
you look
need
at
it right
Fred
away.
Hampton's mutual aid,
Right.
it was then tied to education, right?
Right.
It was, you can get our mutual aid, but you're going to have to come talk to us and learn from us. You know, it's why he ended up working with like the Young Patriots and stuff like that. You know, could be wrong. I could get all that
No,
stuff
you're
mixed
right.
up,
No,
but
you're essentially right. You're basically right. But that's the
yeah.
idea. It's that the community will receive it directly, because under like a lot of these charitable organizations or nonprofits, they'll take like a certain percentage out of what you might give out of donation to kind of cover their costs, and then whatever money is left, if there is any, will go to the people, and it wouldn't be that much. So, you know, but there also needs to be that system in place depending on what your action is, so that people will not be down and out. And that's what makes it tricky, because unfortunately, like our insurance is privatized, like pay, you know, like all that kind of stuff. If you, and like a lot of states, and I'm sure this is going to happen now under Trump, you know, certain organizations will be penalized for striking.
Yep.
You know, so and that's going to be at risk for many people, especially if they need insurance, if they need to get paid, if they need food, and like all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where
there's
I
logistics
totally
that
get it. A
definitely
lot
need
of
to.
that fear comes
Yeah.
in. So yeah, so direct action in of itself, yes, but it has to be tied to other actions so that people will feel protected. So you can't just do it and not think like, so that's why that takes planning and like strategizing, because this stuff is long term. That's really at the core of all of this, is that should take strategizing, that should take planning, that should take like resources outside of the duopoly, outside of government, to be able to assist people in being able to feel confident in doing these sorts. It's like, if you get arrested, like who's gonna
Bail people
bail you
out,
out?
all that. Yep.
All that stuff you need to consider. So like, again, this is why this work is messy, and this is why people are not willing to do it, because it takes a lot of work. It's just trendy and easier just to hold a sign and just be like, hey, I stand against this, and then just go home.
Yeah.
And maybe post on social media just as like a superficial thing of just this action that you're doing, when the point of organized grassroots organizations is that they plan to do shit like this, so that it kind of aligns with ultimately, you know, what you want, the action that you want your leaders to do, that they're able to do it. But you're right. You tack their capital, or I say at minimum, make them scared. Which even that is not really a thing anymore, because all they have to do is just stick the cops on you. So, you know, but
you're gonna have to think outside the box.
Right.
That's my thing.
And those are the conversations that we should be having, because, you know, our government leaders wised up. Like, and we need to be several steps ahead of them so that they become scared again. You know? So Um, so yeah, I get the idea of mutual aid is a mandate, and yeah, it sort of is, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you do.
Yeah.
Like, like if you get a band-aid, like if you get hurt, like you might have to do other shit to make sure that your wound is healed or will heal. Like a band-aid may not necessarily just help it. So, um, but anyway, is there more to this or is that
Yeah,
it?
bit. The two Maersk ships Spain decided to block are not the only ones expected to bring more weapons to Israel, but the full list can be stopped through strong workplace mobilizations. Advocacy alone will not be enough to get the governments to act against the genocide in Palestine. Only a people-led strategy with trained unions playing a central role can accomplish the goal. I feel like there are other options, but it's definitely one of the ways. I think it's a bit like you were saying, it's like the puzzle pieces you have all together. It's the conclusions that are a little like iffy, right?
Right.
Where like, no, I mean, it should be encouraged more of like, I think the spontaneous stuff where options are available to a smaller group of people requires less organizing and has more impact. Me personally, it's just also more risky. So,
especially now.
Right.
And
because like we've seen firsthand, organizing get co-opted very quickly if it means to actually make any change. So keeping it smaller and actions that individuals can take, I think, are important. So, I mean, we've seen what Palestinian Action's been up to too. People are going to prison for throwing soup at plastic. So, like, definitely don't take unnecessary risks.
Right.
But
well, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but like know of the risks. And if you're willing to do it, knowing the risks, go off.
And make sure you got all your P's in order for that too, as far as if things don't go your way.
Right.
So
this is almost kind of why being in an organization might be helpful to you in certain aspects, because at least one, you probably would have talked about this anyway, but two, like they would be in a position to possibly help you if you get into a bind. But then more importantly, you're strategizing as to what you can do potentially to prevent you from getting into that mess. So and then even with the organization is that you have to kind of vet for yourself. But
for sure. Be careful. That's first and foremost. So, but yeah, anything else?
No, I mean, but it worked at least, well, somewhat for them.
For sure.
And, and more people should be doing stuff like this. But I think, again, it's just the idea of like going, in my case, going to Lafayette Plaza, that's where the White House is in DC, and just yell and scream. Guys, they're not there. More often than not, they're not at the White House when you're there, and they don't care. So, so you need to think, we need to, as we said, we need to think outside the box to get them scared that they really are like, oh shit, if I don't do this, then this will happen to me. That is the kind of thing that we need to start talking about.
I think they're not even afraid of their like actual physical well-being. The thing they're afraid of is their money being messed up.
True.
That to me is the thing. If you can figure out how to, divest and sanction as much as possible for yourself, boycott those things, but I think there's other ways to hurt those pocketbooks too, that if people think about it, there's some stuff you can actually act on that with, but we'll see. Talking about these things is most likely why we're demonetized. So you can go scan that QR code on your screen and give us a little dollary dues, help keep the lights on. But, if you can't do that, just like and subscribe, hit the share button, send this to your friends that you think need to hear this. I'm sure there's a couple, but also leave a comment. We actually read those. So get down there. Let us know what you think. Otherwise, help us get to 3K. Hit that subscribe button. What are you doing? You haven't hit it yet? What do I got to do? I got to do a dance or something? I don't know how to do that. Go to TikTok. Go find that. But if you don't, hit the subscribe button. Jesus. How many times I got to tell you? Anyway, thanks for watching. Well, what now, Care Bear? How now, Brown Cow?
Check the chats.
I'm on it. I see Robbie Burns showed up, famous Scottish poet. Robbie Burns. I know it's not, but it is funny. Nyla Nostrum, yes, the challenge is the path of least resistance and the crutch of stopgap measures, but without things like general strikes, we do have to make do with what we have. Pretty much. My thing is waiting on opportunities.
Right.
We haven't seen a lot. We'll let you know.
Nostrum also said people also got guarded about their community solidarity for some and not for others, which we're seeing right now. But there are grifters and the like. Yeah, I think, as I said, I am very weary of who I organize with now.
Especially right now. Chaos is a ladder that people are willing to explore. So
if there are people who will be willing to throw me under the bus with the same people that organize with me because they fear their own rights being taken away, then that's a problem. I will argue that's a bigger problem in and of itself. It's either my liberation is tied to yours, so we fight for it together, or we're not. Otherwise, I can't be with you. Like if you feel that in order to save yourself, you have to essentially destroy my life, then that's not an activist to me. Like you should be doing that at the cost of your life or your rights, or whatever you hold dear, to ensure that others might have the same thing as you. And I think that's kind of the problem. And I think that's kind of a unique thing in this country, is that we're so individualistic that we only care about ourselves, and maybe to a degree the people who are closely related to us, but that's it. It's very hard to kind of figure out how to care for people, especially if they live in another region of the country or another part of the world that we don't necessarily have access to. That we tend not to think of them too hard, because it doesn't affect us directly, so it's like, to hell with them. So and I think especially within the next few months, we're going to see how this plays out, especially in foreign policy. I think that will be a hard lesson for a lot of people to kind of get around, but we'll see though. But I think I think people are just more worried about themselves and not for their neighbor, so to speak.
Luckily in the South, they don't much have a choice. People show up for sugar that you're like, yeah, sure. Otherwise there's enough shotguns to handle the problems after that. So, but weird that way, right? Sure. Anyway, all right. You ready for the next one?
Yeah. So this is actually a 2-for-1. So there was a UN report that basically says, and we've known this because, as I said, we talk about basically Palestine pretty much every week since October 7th, at least a segment. so this doesn't surprise us at all, and those of you who've been following us for a while shouldn't surprise you at all. But the overwhelming deaths that have occurred in Gaza have been among kids, so that shouldn't be surprising. So that report came out, I believe, late last week, if not early this week. Last week there was a scuffle, I would say, in Amsterdam during a soccer match.
Yes. I think in Europe they call it a kerfuffle. I think that's how Europeans
say
things like
so
that.
basically it was like pro Israel supporters basically tried to cause trouble, and then pro-Palestinian activists were like, we ain't having this, stood their ground, and basically like what we're seeing in the media is that, you know, like the Israeli spectators were victimized and basically like, oh, we feel so sorry for these people, and we'll get into this later. But it kind of connects to the UN report, because journalist Sana Saeed made that connection in light of the Amsterdam story that she reported out in Truthout. I think it was Truthout, like earlier this week. So what we're gonna do first, we don't like using social media, but I think it will be gonna give our feet wet in terms of both issues, and then we're gonna dive into them a little bit more, but from the perspective of you know, someone who actually cares about Palestine, and then we'll go into the rest of it as far as the UN report. So so this segment is from today. So watch the whole thing and then we'll get into it later.
Oh,
there we go.
We brought videos. Here, I got you. That on it.
This morning, Israel issuing new warnings to its citizens following last week's attack on soccer fans in Amsterdam. Israelis told to avoid major sporting events in cities across Europe, including the national soccer team's match in Paris on Thursday. The government warning of planned attacks. President Biden and other world leaders condemning the violence in Amsterdam as a widespread anti-Semitic assault, with a pro-Palestinian crowd chasing Israelis, surrounding and beating some of them. But footage also allegedly shows Israeli fans attacking people, chanting anti-Arab slurs before the game.
Right.
Meanwhile, after a year of failed ceasefire negotiations in Gaza, Qatar says it's withdrawing as a mediator until Israel and Hamas show seriousness about reaching a deal.
Today, it's not Israel that is standing in the way of a ceasefire and hostage deal. It is Hamas.
While a new UN report on the early months of the war finds 70% of those killed in Gaza were women and children. Israel rejecting the report's methodology, but acknowledges it's killed around 20,000 civilians, along with a similar number of Palestinian fighters who they say hide among the civilian population. Our team on the scene of this Israeli strike on a tent camp in the courtyard of a hospital. 3 people were killed, witnesses say. Mohammed fled here with her family from northern Gaza. Where do we go, she asks. No schools or hospitals are safe.
Now, we asked the IDF about that hospital strike. They didn't come back to us. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying he has spoken to President-elect Trump 3 times in recent days, which is more than any other world leader that we know of.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday.
Fuck you, Al Roker.
So yeah, basically they sympathize with the Israeli protester spectators.
Yeah.
As mainstream media would do. So I said Truthout, I meant Mondoweiss. So Sana Saeed, if you don't follow her on Twitter, you should. But she wrote an op-ed on this, where she says, no, there were no anti-Semitic pogroms in Amsterdam. Here's what really happened. Media claims of anti-Semitic pogroms against Israeli fans in Amsterdam are the latest in the pattern of false narratives fueling anti-Muslim violence and justifying the genocide in Gaza. So,
ole, ole. Sorry, continue.
Let the IDF win and F the Arabs.
Okay. Sure.
Ole, 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 ole. Why is school out in Gaza? There are no children left there.
Okay.
This is what these were the chants allegedly that the Israeli spectators were saying.
Sure.
On the night of November 7th, there was an anti-Jewish pogrom in Amsterdam as young Dutch Moroccans on scooters descended onto the streets to assault Israeli Jewish football fans.
Yeah, okay.
At least that's the story being told in Western newsrooms and by American and European leaders as the Israeli extermination of Gaza, especially in the north, continues encumbered. Israeli Prime Minister Ben Netanyahu called it a horrific anti-Semitic incident. President Joe Biden said in a tweet, the anti-Semitic attacks on Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam are despicable and echo dark moments in history where Jews were persecuted. We've been in touch with Israeli and Dutch officials and appreciate Dutch authorities' commitment to holding the perpetrators accountable. We must relentlessly fight anti-Semitism wherever. Now, question.
Yes.
Has he said anything?
No.
You don't even know what I was going to say, but
I can already tell you no. You know?
Oh, God.
So
it's just ridiculous, but
we get fucking Vrow genocide, as Claire Daly likes to call her.
Right.
So
Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof, I guess that's how you say it.
Dick Schoof. Okay.
Promised that the perpetrators will be tracked down and prosecuted. EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen gave them a reminder that anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in Europe. Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau stated, the news out of Amsterdam last night is horrifying. This is a dark moment for our world and one we've seen before. The Anti-Defamation League called it a Monday program. Its CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, drawing comparisons to Kristallnacht, saying
remind
that
me where von der Leyen's from?
Huh?
Remind me where von der Leyen's from again?
Where is
when
she
she's
from?
saying there's no place in Europe for anti-Semitism?
Germany.
Right.
Germany.
She's literally like German chancellor or whatever. Like, okay, lady. I think y'all remember the place it used to be at in Europe, though, huh? Like,
Jonathan Greenblatt drawing comparisons to Kristallnacht, saying that Jews on the streets of Amsterdam were hunted, chased, attacked, and forced to hide from an anti-Semitic mob whose goal was to harm as many Jews as possible. Headlines across U.S. news coverage especially signal similar alarm. Violent attacks in Amsterdam tied to anti-Semitism. Scooter youths, not soccer fans, hunt Jews in Amsterdam. Israeli soccer fans suffer anti-Semitic attacks in violent Amsterdam incident. Officials. Amsterdam bans protests enter anti-Semitic squads, attack Israeli soccer fans. Israeli soccer fans targeted in anti-Semitic attacks in Amsterdam. But that's not what happened.
I mean, have they seen Manchester U games? They knock over cars for like a win. That's when they win.
Right.
Like, you know, it's just wild. Do you remember, it wasn't that long ago, was there not groups of men going around London trying to find men of Middle Eastern descent?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't that like not even a couple of months ago?
Probably, yeah.
Did any of them have the same fervor then for the anti-Semitic pogrom, seeing as how a lot of those are Semitic people? I mean, I didn't see it. So
anyway, on November 5th, hundreds of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, reportedly accompanied by Mossad agents, this sounds familiar, have flown into the city for a game against Ajax Football Club. It was reported in the preceding days that pro-Palestinian groups were planning a large protest outside the stadium against the presence of the Israeli football team.
As they have the right to do.
Before the game, there were many reported incidents of violence and intimidation from the Israeli fans, including anti-Arab chants, attacking taxi drivers, ripping down Palestinian flags, and attacking homes with any Palestinian imagery. Emerging video evidence and testimonies from Amsterdam residents indicate that the initial violence came from Maccabi Tel Aviv fans who also disrupted a moment of silence for the Valencia flood victims. But despite that footage and Amsterdamer testimonies, coverage across international media, especially here in the United States, has failed to contextualize the counterattacks against the anti-Arab Israeli mob. Case in point, this is what she tweeted out from with Middle East Eye. There's so much video evidence that shows us how aggressive, provocative, racist, and pro-genocide the Israelis were being, mocking dead Palestinian kids, celebrating IDF war criminals, wishing death to Arabs. The New York Times reporting is incomplete is patently false. This Middle East Eye video does a good job of showing the timeline using some of the video. So let's watch some of it.
We will do so. This and this. I also find it's like you let Israelis stay the night and somehow they think it's their place. You know?
Right.
Like they want to stick their feet up on the furniture and be assholes. Fuck you. Hey, fuck you. Hey, the fuck you. No, fuck you. Zionist bitches.
I guess those are the hostages.
The plan is that right for him, that by element for examiner.
Yeah, so there was more,
filling
but
up
that
paddy wagons.
yeah, so there's more, but you get the idea. Of you know what people recorded on the ground. So anyway, if you go back to the slide, please.
Yep.
Okay. Where there have been mentions of the actions of the Maccabi fans, the critical context of anti-Arab violence and chants is simply an additional detail versus the foundation of the counter-violence. The context of the violence and racism against Arabs is also downplayed, with less severe language being used to describe it. Note this excerpt from the Reuters report on the Amsterdam incident. Videos on social media show riot police in action, with some attackers shouting anti-Israeli slurs. Footage also showed Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters chanting anti-Arab slogans before Thursday's evening's match. Wishing death to Arabs at the hands of the IDF and mocking dead Palestinian children, we are told, is a slogan. Forcing Israelis to say "Free Palestine" is a slur. For the use of these two words, the weight of violence and of blame is immediately shifted to those victimized. It is worth mentioning here that during the course of writing this piece, Sky News posted and deleted a video report of the racist Israeli mob instigation and violence, only to repost the report with its content and copy edited to center the anti-Semitism framing. In other words, a real-time manufacturing of a story to fit a specific narrative, despite all the evidence available. Few things have captured the intentional complicity of the news media in the genocide of Palestinians as transparently and pointedly as this. So this is from Mark Owen Jones posted this on Twitter. So if you move over a little bit to that tweet, he said, "This is nuts. After mysteriously deleting a package covering the Amsterdam protests, Sky News have put up a new version. The new version completely changes the thrust to emphasize that the violence was anti-Semitic. See the opening screen change below." So before, it said, Israeli football fans attacked in Amsterdam, what we know. Then it was reposted to what we know about anti-Semitic violence in Amsterdam.
Right.
So,
yeah. You mean Israel wants to play the victim again, even though they're not?
Yeah, sure.
Like,
the coverage of events in Amsterdam reveal a troubling but transparent and tired pattern. It serves as a theoretical tool to justify violence against Arabs and Muslims, whether in Gaza or within the streets of Europe. Each narrative, whether centered around October 7th or November 7th, invariably positions Jewish suffering and historical trauma at its core, thus reinforcing the notion of a Jewish right to violence. Any contextualization of that portrays Israelis or Jewish Zionists as aggressors threatens to disrupt this carefully curated monopoly on suffering. In the case of Amsterdam, the media framing and sensational headlines reinforce an image of the Israeli mob as victims, besieged by an enraged Arab mob that hunts Jews in the streets. The timing, occurring just before the anniversary of Kristallnacht, adds a haunting reminiscence that has allowed the narrative of Jewish persecution to be put at the center of coverage and condemnation. So she didn't say this, but this kind of seems planned, like to make that connection, like given the date. So, which I wouldn't be surprised because we know the Israeli lobby has done similar shit within the past year in the US as well. This framing, both directly and indirectly, echoes Israeli and Zionist propaganda relying on manufactured anti-Semitism and long-standing racist tropes about Arab and Muslim. It perpetuates a narrative of eternal victimhood that is wielded to justify the ongoing extermination of 2.2 million Palestinians. And thus our media gives permission for violence, American, European, and Israeli, towards Arabs and Muslims. It gives permission for the US-backed Israeli eradication of Palestinians because we are told again and again that Jews are not safe anywhere. The claims and experiences of Palestinians, of Arabs and Muslims might be tragic, but we must always consider Jewish suffering and trauma first and foremost. That is what must always be protected, always at the helm at our outrage. The coverage of the anti and racist counterattacks in Amsterdam explicify that. On the same day, Western leaders flocked to condemn a non-existent program against Jews, the UN Office on Human Rights released a report indicating that 70% of those killed in Gaza are women and children, mainly children between the ages of 5 and 9. And a lack of condemnation of outrage, even acknowledgement of that from Western leaders and newsrooms who are culpable in that 70%, is why there is condemnation of a program that never happened. So, which we will go into with Truthout, written by Sharon Zhang, where she goes into that more specifically. So she writes, babies and toddlers aged 0 to 4 are among the most represented age groups of those killed by Israel. So she writes, women and children make up the vast majority of those slaughtered by Israeli forces in Gaza amid the genocide. The UN has found in an eye-opening report that warns that Israel is committing grave violations of international law in Gaza that may also constitute genocide. In a 31-page report published Friday, the UN Human Rights Office found that of the thousands of killings the office was able to verify between the beginning of Israel's genocide and September of this year, 44% of killings were of children, while 25% were women, adding up to 70% of the death toll. In other words, the report found that children made up the largest single group of people killed by Israel. The three categories most represented were children ages between 5 and 9 years old, children between 10 and 14, and babies and toddlers ages 0 to 4. So, I mean, so basically kids and teenagers,
Right.
more or less. I'm not sure how they phrase it that way, but, but it's gross. The report says that the proportion of women and children killed are an indication of Israel's widespread killings of civilians and failure to comply with fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. The civilian death toll is likely far higher than 70%, as Israeli forces have also adopted the practice of labeling all men in Gaza as affiliated with Hamas without evidence in order to justify their mass slaughter. On top of killings of thousands of men, Israeli forces have rounded up Palestinian men and boys en masse, including healthcare workers, and abducted them to camps where they face severe torture before being released, indefinite imprisonment, or death, which you've reported on before.
Yep.
The agency noted that it was not able to verify more deaths because Israel's assault has made humanitarian activities extremely challenging, with Israeli authorities blocking access to UN monitors and killing UN personnel. The findings further contradict Israeli forces and US officials' repeated insistence, not backed by evidence, that Israel is taking the necessary steps to protect civilians amid the genocide. As the report notes, as of April, though Israeli forces have killed over 34,000 Palestinians, if not far more, according to some estimates, they have only announced the names of 75 Palestinians specifically targeted for death. Within the verified killings, about 80% were killed in residential buildings or other housing, the report found. Among those deaths, 88% were killed in incidents that killed 5 or more Palestinians, further underscoring the indiscriminate nature of Israel's attacks. The report contains some of the strongest UN-sanctioned language yet to describe Israel's assault, saying it is likely that the widespread disregard for civilian protections under international law amounts to genocide. In many instances, the violations documented in the report by the parties could amount to war crimes, the report said. If committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against the civilian population, further to a state or organization policy, they may constitute crimes against humanity. If committed with intent to destroy, in whole or part, a national, ethical, racial, or religious group, they may also constitute genocide, it goes on. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk called for Israel to immediately comply with numerous binding ICJ orders demanding an end to Israeli military's assault. It is essential that there is due to reckoning with respect to allegations of serious violations of international law through credible and impartial judicial bodies, and that, in the meantime, all relevant information and evidence are collected and preserved, said Turk. So there's that. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, sounds like Israel playing the victim again, trying to, when in reality, they're not. Like, so
right.
Possibly manufactured, even if not definitely manipulated by media. So, yeah.
And right. And it's not surprising because we've seen this before. Like the election was last week. This event happened last Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
No coverage at all.
Right.
I didn't see any, like the only reason why I kind of knew about it, I think it was maybe Indy who shared the story with me initially. And but also I'm also kind of surprised that even in independent media now, again, not to say I understood it, but I knew that this election would make people hyper focused on that. But even this story kind of went under the radar. I'm surprised that our colleagues didn't even report on the Amsterdam story.
Yeah.
Seeing that it was somewhat big news even in mainstream media, even though we know that they're going to bias it against Arabs.
Right.
So that kind of surprised me that it didn't get as much attention as I believe it probably should. But regardless, it does relate to the fact that mostly children, have been killed. And again, like people were talking about, oh, we can push Biden left, we can push Kamala left. Like Biden sat with the Israeli president today, I believe, right? And
I do believe.
I'm like,
and with literal Hitler, I think, today too.
Right. Like, I haven't heard Kamala say anything about this report. I haven't heard anyone in mainstream media say anything regarding this. If there is, let us know. But this just, and this is why people didn't vote for Kamala, people. It's because of this. And you're blaming Arabs for wanting to vote for Trump. Again, like, not to say they were right, but at the same time, it's like, you have all this shit going on, and this is kind of the danger of, like, protesting, like, and that's a question that people should be asking, like, if you protest and they don't do shit, then what do you do? And so many people were basically like, fuck this, I'll vote for Trump. And sure, you can argue that they did it for spite, and we're going to suffer the consequences. But this is kind of, again, going back to the first segment where the blame comes in. It's like, you can't blame people for voting the other way when the party that is more closer to you, allegedly in theory, in terms of your values, don't do the very thing that you want them to do or you're pushing them to do. And it's not just that issue. Like, take any progressive issue that Democrats were like, basically been like, kick rocks. We're not going to do that. So, honestly, it's still the idea of, like, I figured that people would catch the hint that Democrats are shit, but there's still people who are still defending the party. Like, that is just wild to me. Like, even now that, people are mad that Democrats are shit.
Yes. Like, I mean, people are mad. I'm not. They're been there, done that, got over that anger. Like, they have to let them get through all the stages of grief, Collin, and they're gonna be in denial for a while. That river in Egypt runs deep, friend.
But when are they gonna get when are they gonna get to acceptance? I don't think
they might not. They might not make it that far. They might be willing to not accept it. So, but we'll see. They're gonna be all right. They're gonna be fine. So I'm worried about the people that won't be. That's what that mutual aid's for. So, But anyway, speaking of mutual aid, look at that. We accept donations. We appreciate all the help that you were willing to give us here. You can scan that QR code on your screen. Go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork and, us up with some moolah. We appreciate that. And if you can't do that, like and subscribe. Very simple stuff. Share the video. Copy the link. Send it to your friend. Leave comments and whatnot. Let us know what you think. Otherwise, get the hell out of here, man. Thanks for watching. All right. You ready for our last one? We should probably look at the chat before we do that. Doing over on the Rumble? I think it's all lizard people on the Rumble today. I will link Rumble, though. For people who want to follow us on a platform that isn't YouTube, you're welcome to do so at Rumble. Anyway. All right. Well, let's get to our last one. Okay. So, Collin, you were wondering what this is about, and
yes,
you might be afraidies tonight. So you can't sleep. I hopefully it will not provide you with too much nightmare fuel. Nah, it won't be that bad. But terrible news, everyone. Robot that watched surgery videos performs with skill of human doctor, says Jill Rosen at the Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins.
Johns, yes.
Johns. Yes. Have you seen this? Because I didn't see this anywhere else. This was kept kind of quiet.
No, but you're the one that will pull this shit. So
yes, I find them, and sometimes they come up later in about like 2 years, and then we're like, oh yeah, we remember. But a robot trained for the first time by watching videos of seasoned surgeons executed the same surgical procedures as skillfully as the human doctors. Again, says John Hopkins, who I think did the study. Right? So keep that in mind as we continue to read where the biases might lie in this story. Okay? The successful use of imitation, learning to train surgical robots, eliminates the need to program robots with each individual move required during a medical procedure, and brings the field of robotic surgery closer to true autonomy, where robots could perform complex surgeries without human help. The findings, led by Johns Hopkins University researchers, are being spotlighted this week at the Conference on Robot Learning in Munich, a top event for robotics and machine learning. So expect more nightmare fuel coming in the next weeks. Because that's what that's going to be. The Conference on Robot Learning. So it's really magical to have this model, and all we do is feed it camera input, and it can predict the robotic movements needed for surgery, said senior author Alex Krieger, an assistant professor in GHU's Department of Medical Engineering, and definitely does not sound like an evil scientist. Axel Krieger definitely doesn't sound like an evil scientist. Sorry. Like if I was writing a comic book that I needed a evil scientist, I would name them Alex Krieger. Anyway, I digress. He says, we believe this marks a significant step forward toward a new frontier in medical robotics. Camera video.
Oh no.
So this is the surgical robot. Right. So it watched doctors do sutures, right? So they're trying to equate that, like, even if it messed up, it figured stuff out on its own. Right? So, like, even if it didn't follow the procedures, it watched closely. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's able to, like, pick up the needles, you know. So, like, they're just saying it could do it in different training environments. It trained on silicone suture pads, but if the environment changes, it's fine. Right? This, you know, we can now mess with our new robot overlord and make it mess up. So, I mean, this is just surgical robots. This is pretty standard stuff these days. You know? But the key factor being this newfound, they're watching, like, how-to surgery on YouTube and then doing surgery. So how does this make you feel?
Pretty much. Well, to
Yes.
be fair, just for people who didn't see it, they were using it on meat, not humans. Like, I
Yes.
think it was like
Or
chicken, meat,
silicone.
pork, or silicone
Yes.
there. So they weren't
Yep.
using that on human flesh.
Yet. But I mean, surgical robots are used plenty. That's a pretty standard thing. Usually it's like operated by a surgeon because theoretically
Right, but
those
that's
tiny
the
little
thing.
hands.
It's like, right, that's the thing. It's usually like a surgeon who's controlling it, or at
Yes.
least programmed to
Right.
do what you want it to do. This sounds like you said in the article, it's autonomous. So the robot is essentially doing the work.
Yes.
So it's like,
but Collin, it watched a video of a surgeon do the procedure and then making decisions. Yes. Not
that
ideal.
almost sounds like I can do that. Almost.
Well,
like
I hate to tell the medical students but that's kind of what they do too. They're looking up YouTube appendicitis operation.
Right. Like, but this is the danger of AI. It's like, we've talked about this as far as art, but I don't think we've kind of talked about it in terms of other industries as well. But I wouldn't have necessarily thought about it in the medical field. Like, essentially, in a way, if this gets good or good enough, that will just make surgeons almost obsolete. Like, especially like with the human factor of things going wrong. Like, a robot doesn't have that type of, complexity, I would argue. So, so on one hand, you can make the argument of, like, human error, like, might cause a mistake, which could be fatal, which, I could definitely buy that idea, but also it's a robot. Like, like, just with the software or whatever, there's a lot of shit to me that can easily go wrong with that too. So
I'll get to, let's continue a bit and I'll get to the kicker for me. So the team, which included Stanford University researchers, used imitation learning to train the Da Vinci surgical system robot to perform these fundamental tasks required in surgical procedures: manipulating a needle, lifting body tissue, and suturing. In each case, the robot trained on the team's model performed the same surgical procedures as skillfully as human doctor, quote unquote. The model combined imitation learning with the same machine learning architecture that underpins ChatGPT. However, where ChatGPT works with words and text, this model speaks robot with kinematics, a language that breaks down the angles of robotic motion into math. Right? So the researchers fed their models hundreds of videos recorded from wrist cameras placed on the arms of Da Vinci robots during surgical procedures. These videos, recorded by surgeons all over the world, are used for post-operative analysis and then archived. Nearly 7,000 Da Vinci robots are used worldwide, and more than 50,000 surgeons are trained on the system, creating a large archive of data for robots to imitate. While the Da Vinci system is widely used, researchers say it's notoriously imprecise, but the team found a way to make the flawed input work. The key was training the model to perform relative movements rather than absolute actions, which are inaccurate. All we need is image input, and then this AI system finds the right action, said lead author Ji Woong Breen Kim, a postdoctoral researcher at Johns Hopkins. We find that even with 100 demos, the model is able to learn the procedure and generalize new environments it hasn't encountered. See, we're starting to get to the machine learning side of this, right?
Right.
So, again, New Frontier, all that stuff, Alex Krieger. But Krieger also said the model is so good learning things we haven't taught it. Like if it drops the needle, it will automatically pick it up and continue. This isn't something I taught it to do.
That's scary.
That's fucking terrifying.
What is that science?
Right. If it learns to pick up the needle by itself, what else with the needle does it fucking willing to try? Right. You know? How do you define that? Like, Jesus Christ. Anyway, the model could be used to quickly train a robot to perform any type of surgical procedure. The researchers said the team is now using imitation learning to train a robot to perform not just small surgical tasks, but a full surgery.
Of course.
Before this advancement, programming a robot to perform even a simple aspect of a surgery required hand coding every step. Someone might spend a decade trying to model suturing, Krieger said, and that's suturing for just one type of surgery. It's very limiting, Krieger said. What is new here is we only have to collect imitation learning of different procedures, and we can train a robot to learn it in a couple of days. It allows us to accelerate to the goal of autonomy while reducing medical errors and achieving more accurate surgery. So, yeah. Any thoughts?
Hopefully I will never get surgery by a robot.
Hopefully
I just never get surgery. Like, maybe for like a minor procedure, I feel, but a major one, like, you know. But as he said, if the robot is able, like, has that type of what do you call it? Like sentience. Essentially, that's kind of what it's not that, but it is that in a sense.
Yes.
Because
I should find that thing, but
yeah, but if the robot is capable to think on its own to pick up the damn needle if it drops on the floor,
right?
Like, but even with that, like, I'm even like, why would a robot drop it at all? That's kind of like another thing. But
well, that's the thing, is that they're trying to get it to, like, a lot of things that they were working on were putting it into environments that it hadn't already been before, right? So it's like, okay, you trained this on like silicone, you watched it being done on silicone, but if we give you like work, can you do it there? Right? If we've never trained you on any of that. Like, that's a lot of it, right? So the degree of autonomy may not be, and of course it's monitored, and I'm sure there's someone with a big red button somewhere, hopefully. I've always been torn on this, because theoretically, with enough data, like, you could generally make these are already being used in surgery with pretty decent results from what I've seen.
Sure.
Like,
But again, that's the idea of like,
it's just now a robot is mimicking the motions of a,
and essentially almost making decisions.
Well,
So-
theoretically, it could do that better than a human. Human has a ton of limiting factors in this. Whereas, the issue is when that robot decides that these numbers are better, like if it's making decisions on humans' lives, which we are already expecting things like robot cars to do, right? Like, the robot cars has to literally play the trolley problem, right? Do I run into the wife with a baby stroller, or, the group of small children?
I'm not a Trekkie, but I do remember, and unfortunately it's not the right series, but Star Trek Voyager,
Yeah.
where the doctor had, now keep in mind the doctor, those of you not Trekkie,
He's
like
a
the doctor,
hologram.
hologram, but
He's fake.
he had the choice. He had the choice of, like, he had to do surgery, but he can only say, like, it was between like one of the main cast of members of the show and just a random extra, so like,
Right.
so he chose like the ensemble cast member, the character,
Right.
but the other person died, because he can only perform the surgery on one of them at a time. So he chose his friend first, and then the other one died. And then, like, the idea, like, he just went into a tailspin of guilt that Captain Janeway basically had to delete that memory
Right.
from him so that he wouldn't kind of spiral. So it's kind of like this similar idea of, like, if the robot has to make that kind of choice, like, what is the implications of that? Like, now, granted, the hologram, like the Doctor in the series, basically was more human-like in that regard.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of where I'm kind of wondering, will there be that
You watched the
human
TNG
component?
What Makes a Man episode or whatever,
Right.
where they have Data on trial. Do you watch that one?
Mm-mm.
That one's a good one in this regard too, because essentially, like, it's Picard arguing with, to say that Data is more human than machine because he meets all these qualifications for sentience.
Right.
But I don't know.
But-
It's complicated. To me, this is it pushes so much with if a robot is doing it and AI is doing it, how is it not free to the public if we can subsidize that technology properly, effectively, and make it safe for the people, which we have the ability to do. We did go to the moon, supposedly. Like, to me, that kind of thing is worth. I don't know. It's complicated. It's like, clearly there's bodily autonomy issues, and then who's now you can theoretically sue a human surgeon for what do they call that?
Malpractice.
Malpractice. Like, could you do that to your like, would it then be Da Vinci's problem? Right? Would you sue the company to be like class action? Because like that happens now. Like right now, there's a ton of autonomy in surgery and stuff like that. Like, they don't want to have to like do a fucking perfect like slice or X-ray or whatever. So their computers are doing a lot of that. So I don't know. This is the thing, is that when AI was first pushed as a thing, it was for stuff like this and for stuff like, being able to find cures for cancer and things like that by looking at like DNA sequencing and things like that. So, which then we get to CRISPR and fun things like that. But yeah, I don't know. Definitely isn't like lets me sleep any easier about it. So
No.
But
I mean, I'd rather not think about that right now, but I think the implications of this, I think, need to be explored more. But I think definitely, you can have data, but but that's missing in of itself the human element, like the personality and all, like of the being behind the data. Like,
well, and this is also now you're realizing why a lot of resources right now are, our resource wars are changing locations to places with lithium and power production, right? All the stuff that AI and computing and technology, all those minerals we need for that are becoming more important. So, like, all foreign powers are working on this because it's like, it's an effective tool, so, and we may not understand its complete power at this point. So, it's like the thing that every science fiction show has ever warned us of, but whatever, it's gonna be fine. It'll be fine. It couldn't possibly come back to, it's see, people forget the way to beat a Terminator is to have another Terminator. That's the way they always beat the Terminators. So get those robotics teams out, kids. I'm just saying, we're gonna need our own robo-dogs. So, but anyway, talking about these things is why we're demonetized. I guarantee it. So scan that QR code on your screen or with your third eyeballs that you put in. But, you know, you can always go to that URL down here, ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork. Give us a little $1 due. But if you can't do that, like and subscribe, hit the share button, leave a comment, let us know what you think. Are you as terrified as we are? I hope not. I hope so. We're gonna need help. Help us. Help us. We're stuck in this crazy world. Get us out of here. Help. Anyway, help us get to 3K. Thanks for watching. Okay, we did it. Yeah, we did it. What's coming up next week, Care Bear?
I don't know.
Me either. We're gonna be trying to get some interviews coming, I do believe. We're trying to line up some guests for that. So look out for that. How do we miss that this Sunday? I do believe, if nothing else changes, I think Indy's been chomping at bits.
And then Himbo has a new show.
Yep. I think him and Angel are going to be doing a thing soon. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So stay tuned. Always, you know, follow us on Twitter at Ginnity News. We do try to send those updates out that way. But yep, otherwise, you know, same bad time, same bad channel and all that. So unless you got anything you're wanting to do soon. So
I'm going to be working on some stuff. So once I confirm that, I'll let you guys know. But that'll be probably around December. So
Julio. All right. Well, as always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
Yeah.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.